So someone who starts from basically nothing in their late 30s, 40s, or even 50s can genuinely end up in the exact same place as a person who started at like 25. And they don't need 30 or 40 years to do it. They just need a handful. See, that 25-year-old drip feeding like 100, 200 pounds a month into investments, that's great. But it'll be 3 decades before it turns into anything worth having. The late starter, however, can pull level with that in a fraction of the time. See, a while ago, a bloke came down and sat in front of me. He was 53, worked hard his whole life, and he brought this folder in with him with everything in it. And he could barely look at me when he opened it. It was almost like some weird confessional booth. And he goes, look, I've left it too late. I've missed the boat. I know I've done wrong. Now, yeah, okay, look, he had a modest pension, but he had a house that was nearly his, essentially. He'd paid off a lot of his equity. But he had this quiet shame sitting on top of all of it, because he had been sold the same story that literally everyone gets. Put a little bit away in your 20s, let compound interest do its thing for 30 years, and guess what? You wake up rich. And he didn't do that. Right? Life happened instead, like it does for almost anyone. And I told him exactly what I tell every single person who says that to me. You have not missed the boat. You've just got to kind of sail in a completely different one, because it all comes down to 3 things, essentially, that a late starter has, 3 advantages that a 25-year-old would honestly kill for. And the first one is the one that genuinely everybody underestimates. So let's start there, because genuinely it kind of flips this whole thing on its head. Now, look, we know the 25-year-old has time, sure. But look at everything else that they've got on top of it, right? A junior salary, they've got no equity in anything, and they have got, 2 or 3 decades of enormous, unpredictable spending coming straight at them, right? The wedding, property, kids, a bigger house. Every time they potentially build up a little bit of momentum, life kicks the legs out from underneath it. Their savings keep getting kind of interrupted before it can ever really keep going and have that beautiful exponential curve. But now look at where potentially you are right now. Late 30s, 40s, 50s, wherever this finally clicked for you and wherever you are now. Completely different picture. Your salary is probably the highest it's ever been, probably right near your earnings peak. Your mortgage is either knocked down significantly or it's kind of fixed and boring and predictable. The kids maybe are standing finally on their own 2 feet or potentially costing you a little bit less. And that one actually sneaks up on people. So that same bloke, we were talking about it, once his youngest kind of moved out and the money stopped flowing out with it, suddenly he had like extra money every single month. I think it was like 500 extra pounds a month that he had just sitting there at the end of every month, and he kind of like genuinely didn't know what to do with it, which is the thing, right? This is the whole thing. Maybe for the first time in your whole life, there is a genuine, real surplus money left over month after month that nobody's been earmarked or has got a claim on, right? Now that surplus, that leftover amount of money, that is the weapon. I call it your contribution velocity, which is just a slightly fancy way of saying the sheer volume of cash that you can fire into your investments month after month without it kind of hurting you. And it's the thing that people kind of forget that actually is the thing that matters the most in the first place. Now, just very quickly, I can already feel the 25-year-olds that are potentially watching this bristling at this. Yes, but timing the market, compound interest. I've got 30 years, you haven't. All right, well, let's hold that thought, because you're about to watch the maths quietly turn on you a little bit. That 25-year-old on 200 quid a month needs 30 years for it to snowball into something serious. But someone starting later, putting away $3,000 a month out of those peak earnings, hits the same number in a fraction of time. So I know that's obviously not the same mathematical input, but as a percentage of your relative spare income, it might be the same actual percentage that those two people are putting away. The £200 might genuinely be 10% of their money each month, whereas £3,000 might be 10% of what's coming in each month to someone else. You just don't know. So it's all about that percentage increase. So with this, you're not trying to magically sort of recreate 30 years of compounding. You can't, right? And chasing that ghost is exactly where people get themselves in knots. You're doing something completely different altogether. It's a bit like, think of it like filling up a bath, right? The kid that's got the plug-in, right? And they've got the plug-in for 30 odd years, that's fair enough. But they've only got a slow kind of little trickle coming out of the tap. So yeah, okay, they've got it going, but it's not that much. Now, you've turned up late, you've slammed the plug in, and you've got the taps, both of them running on full blast. And honestly, you would be very, very surprised at how quickly that water level would catch up. Now, that's the cash, right? The money side of it. But the second weapon, the second advantage has got absolutely nothing to do with money at all. It's between your ears mainly. And genuinely, it's the one that I would fight the hardest to keep. And to explain it, I kind of have to embarrass myself a little bit. Okay, so bear with me on this one. Now, 20-something-year-old me, very young, right? First paycheck, and I remember this so explicitly at the time, I was absolutely convinced I was going to trade my way to a fortune, right? Picking stocks, punting on individual stock bets, chasing whatever stock or company the lads at work would not shut up about. I was throwing money at penny stocks because someone in a group chat swore blind that they were going to 10x, right? And the whole thing, and the whole time, there's this, I remember it so vividly, there's this little voice in the back of your head going, oh, it doesn't matter. I've got loads of time, right? I've got loads of time. If it goes to zero, I can just earn it back. It's only a little bit. It's a casino, right? And you're sort of telling yourself that you can afford the chips and it's just fun money. And I remember that so vividly, just being like, oh, it doesn't matter. I wasted so much money on that sort of stuff. But when you start late, that option isn't there anymore. And here's the thing that everyone assumes is the bad news. That sounds like a disadvantage, doesn't it? Losing your room to make mistakes. It isn't. Because what actually happens is you don't just lose the sort of luxury of messing around and speculating and wasting money on stuff. You actually, more often than not, lose the desire to do that. I know I certainly did. You've probably lived through like enough experiences in the investment world by now, right? You've probably seen a crash or two. You've watched the get rich quick crowd get rich for like 18 months and then quietly disappear. So when I sit down with someone later on, like I say, late 30s, 40s, 50s, and hand them a plan that is frankly probably dull, right? Repetitive. Nothing that you'd ever brag about at the barbecue. They don't fight me on it. They just do it. They just do it because that psychology is so much more different. And that bloke, the one that thought he'd missed the boat early on, sat dead still through the market. There was like market wobbles, like when Trump started talking about some stuff a year or so ago. He didn't ring me, he didn't panic, he didn't touch a thing. He just let it ride because he understood the stakes in a way that he didn't at the previous age, at like a 25-year-old. Every month, no drama, no tinkering. 25-year-old me would have just sold the lot in an afternoon and told myself that I was clever. I see this absolutely constantly in my one-to-one coaching. The late starters are almost always the easiest people I work with because they've stopped wanting to be entertained, right, by their money. They just want the thing to work. And that FOMO that absolutely kind of wrecks young investors. I see this all the time. It drives me crazy. That itch to jump on whatever's mooning this week. For a late starter, it's simply gone. It just doesn't exist. And that's the whole thing, really. A boring plan that you'll actually stick to will beat a clever plan that you keep meddling with and getting in the way of. Every single time that's true. It doesn't matter how late you started. So, cash flow, discipline, and now the sharp end, where you actually fire all of those things all together. Because you haven't got the years to recover from a bad bet going wrong. What you need is the most direct, low friction route to growth and growing your money and investing that there actually is out there available to you. No scenic detours, no time to waste, which quietly rules out a couple of things straight away. The first, okay, you can't be handing over 1.5% a year to an active fund manager, okay? What that is basically someone that you're paying good money to kind of hand pick shares to try to beat the market on your behalf. It's an investment fund. Now, that sounds sensible on paper. And look, I am not going to pretend that active funds are worthless, right? They've got their place. And my God, I use them with clients here and there when it genuinely fits their objective and what they want to achieve and how we can balance their portfolio. But that is exactly the point. It takes knowing like which one, when you should invest, who should you use it for, why. And for most people watching this, picking a good fund in the right circumstance for the right reason that is actively managed year after year, it just isn't going to happen. Most of them don't even actually beat the market anyway. Not all of them have that objective of beating the market, but a lot of them don't actually achieve it. And picking the right one is nigh on impossible. And the reality is that fee comes out every year, regardless of whether they've earned it or not. 1.5% can sound like nothing, a rounding error mostly. But over the few short years that you've got, if you're a late starter, that is not a rounding error. That's a kind of slow puncture in the one tire that you can't afford to lose air from. Look, I'll die on this hill a little bit, right? Fees are not everything. It drives me absolutely crazy that when you watch content online, there's such a oversimplified perspective of costs. Whenever you look at any video online, it will say costs are the most important thing. But there's an element of truth to it in the fact that they are genuinely the only thing in the whole game that you can actually control and guarantee. You can't control the market. You can't control which fund manager is going to have a good run. But what you can control is what you hand over in costs and charges. When you've sort of compressed everything into a handful of years, that leak in terms of fees is kind of genuinely the last thing you need. Second, you can't bet the whole retirement on 3 tech stocks that just you happen to have a good feeling about, okay? One profit warning or one bad time and you are sunk with no time left to climb back out. Just can't do it, okay? Right, so the question is then, what do you actually do? Well, here's where it matters when you are a late starter. It isn't about finding the cleverest fund to invest into and put your money into. You haven't got the room to be that clever. And that points to one thing specifically, the boring one. A low cost, globally diversified, market cap weighted index fund. And let me just unpack that a little bit because it's more of a mouthful and easy for me to say than it is complicated. So let me just explain. So a global index fund is basically just one pot that you put your money into and it spreads your money across a tiny slice of thousands of the biggest, most successful companies in the planet at once. You're not picking individual winners. You're just quietly buying the whole market, the whole asset class of equities, if that's what you want to do with your money. And market cap weighted just means that it automatically moves more of your money to the biggest companies and less to the tiny ones. So as a company grows, you already automatically start owning more of it without doing a thing. They are brilliant sort of weird pseudo momentum funds, global index funds. Really, really important weapons. Simple, works well, one size fits all for essentially if you want asset class exposure to equities. That is the most important part. If you want to invest in the stock market, this is your best bet. And this is the part I actually love, right? Because it does the one job that you haven't got time to do for yourself. It's a self-cleaning mechanism. It's this momentum aspect. If a company starts failing, what happens is it shrinks and slides out of the index on its own. If some firm that you've never heard of explodes into the next Nvidia, it climbs up the ranks and you automatically start to own more of it. No like balance sheets, no earnings forecasting, no guessing which name wins next. It's a bit like, think about like a league table, like a sports league table, right? The teams that are having a shocker will slide down and eventually get relegated altogether. The ones that are on a tear, well, they climb to the top, right? And you're not picking any of it. You're not betting on one individual team. You're just buying the whole league itself. Whoever happens to be winning that season, you're just already holding them. And that's the whole point of someone in your shoes. You haven't got years to survive betting on an individual team that may get relegated or promoted. So you take the one route where a wrong bet statistically, genuinely kind of can't happen. Nothing to pick, nothing to get wrong, nothing to quietly sink you while you're not looking. For a late starter, that isn't, in my opinion, a boring option. It's the only option that works consistently and, more importantly, lets you sleep. So here's what we do. You take that peak earning surplus, your contribution velocity, and you set it to fire into, if you want to invest in the stock market, a global index fund automatically every single month. And then you just get out of its own way. You're not timing anything. You're not being clever. You're just letting the biggest companies on the planet do what they've done for hundreds of years. Slowly, messily, sure, but reliably get bigger over time. And you're just along for the ride. And you're pairing that with the one thing that a 25-year-old simply will not have. The ability to throw real money at that right now, today, in the kind of volume that actually makes sense and also catch right up. Now, all of that is very well, right? Contribution velocity and having the ability to put money into something big time is the key superpower. That is the advantage. But sometimes there is more to this whole thing than just arbitrarily investing your spare cash, which is why, genuinely, I really think that you should watch this video here next, because what I did is I laid out exactly, step by step, what I would do if I was in your position, someone who's starting to get truly serious about their money. So give it a click and I will see you there.